On November 21st, 1999, 5-year-old Elian Gonzalez boarded a small aluminum boat with a bad motor with his mother, Elizabeth Brotons Rodriguez, and 12 others. And they were headed from Cuba to the United States, which is about 90 miles. They hit a storm, and the boat capsized despite everyone trying to bail out the water out of the boat. Elizabeth placed Elian into an inner tube that she brought just in case, and this saved his life. But Elizabeth and her boyfriend died. Elian and 2 others survived. Now, Elian's mother and father had been divorced before his birth, and generally they shared custody while they were in Cuba. Now, Elian's mother snuck Elian into that boat and headed to the U.S. without his dad, Juan Miguel, knowing. Immigration and Naturalization Service, which was INS at the time, and now is actually several agencies, including ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement. These are all under the Department of Homeland Security. But at the time, INS released Elian to his paternal great uncle who lived in the United States in Miami. From then on, a blazing custody and immigration dispute ensued. And if you were alive and aware at the time, you know about this case. It was in the news every single day for months. The U.S. and Cuban governments were going back and forth on who should get custody of Elian from November 1999 to April 22nd, 2000. Elian's status was debated. Does he fall under the wet foot, dry foot policy, where Cuban immigrants who made it to U.S. soil were automatically granted asylum, or where if they were intercepted at sea, they were returned to Cuba? Will Elian benefit most from being raised a United States or a Cuban citizen, and who decides that? The Clinton administration and most federal courts agreed that Elian should be returned to his father in Cuba. Several times, Janet Reno, who was the attorney general at the time, she ordered that Elian be returned to his father, but Elian's U.S. relatives refused to hand him over because they believed he was better off living and being raised in the United States. On Saturday, April 22nd of 2000, there is a picture that actually won the Pulitzer, and that everyone living around that time knows this picture. It is a terrified Elian Gonzalez screaming and crying. He's in the arms of a man, and an INS agent is in full battle rattle, full riot gear, points an AR-15 in the little boy's face. Now, according to official documents, agents of the United States Border Patrol's BORTAC unit knocked on the door and identified themselves, but Elian's family did not answer. And there were actually protesters outside of the house and news and everything. So everyone knew something was going to happen, but they weren't sure when. So apparently they entered the house and they basically maced anyone inside or outside that was trying to interfere with them getting Elian. They ransacked the house looking for him and eventually found him in a back room with Donata Dalrymple, who was actually one of the men rescued with Elian from the sea. Elian was returned to his father in DC, where there were lots of happy photo ops, of course, and he was raised with his father in Cuba. Elian is now 31 years old, which is hard to imagine. He has a degree in industrial engineering from the University of Matanzas and was elected in April 2023 to the Cuban parliament. You can imagine that he was used by the Cuban politicians as, what's a good way to say this? He was used. He was supported very well and used for the Communist Party. Now, after this raid, which had this horrible picture that was all over the world and all kinds of drama, after this raid, both sides of the aisle exploited this, and they used very strong language and imagery to their political advantage. Since this was under the Clinton administration and this was kind of their call, they relied on the reunion photos with the father. Happy reunion, look, we've returned this child to his father, all is well. Whereas on the other side, the Republicans had a lot of very strong language against how this happened, against the raid. Jesse Helms, he was a Republican senator from North Carolina. I think he lived to be over 100. At the time, he called the photo a grotesque image of the seizure at gunpoint. Tom DeLay was a Republican congressman at the time, called the agents who raided the house jackbooted thugs. And then Republican Congressman Lincoln Diaz Balart of Florida called the raid an Orwellian monstrosity. Language and images are vital to how we talk about immigration. And politicians, or anyone with a strong opinion for or against immigrants, leverage language to further their point. I spoke to Reka Sharma Crawford, an immigration attorney based out of Kansas City, Missouri, about the current level of ICE raids, or as she prefers, ICE targeted enforcements, and what legal recourse immigrants have, if any, if they're arrested or deported. Immigration isn't really just an issue of whether or not someone is a criminal, but rather is also a labor and humanitarian issue. Reka is a partner in the Sharma Crawford law firm, and they specialize in aggressively defending the rights of non-citizens. She has been an adjunct professor teaching immigration law at the University of Kansas, as well as Washburn University School of Law. She has spoken several times at national conferences for the AILA, or the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And in 2024, Reka was elected to the AILA's executive committee as treasurer, having also completed her term as secretary from 2023 to 2024. She has earned several awards for her work in immigration law and for her work in advocating for her clients. We had a great discussion. We talked about the ICE targeted enforcement and what's going on with that, but also generally about what happens when immigrants are arrested, what process are they, what are they kind of due to have, or what rights do they have, if any, and just how the court proceedings go, but also the greater issue of immigration being an issue of labor. And I just really enjoyed talking to her. And if your ears have really been in tune to what's going on in immigration, of course, since President Trump took office, but also honestly for the decades prior to this, then I think you'll really enjoy this episode. So enjoy, and I can't wait to hear from my listeners what you think.